So at this stage, can we just change gears? And can I introduce our two keynote speakers, Chris Jansen, who's a senior lecturer in Organisational Leadership at UC Education. He also, through his consulting company, Leadership Lab, works alongside education, community, business and health organisations in the design and delivery of leadership programs. And his colleague, Dr. Cheryl Doig, who directs Think Beyond. She's a leadership futurist. She curates leadership ideas on her website, which you can hook into and join. She's currently writing a book about collaboration using case studies from the aftermath of the Christchurch earthquakes. And so they are non-identical Siamese twins who will come and take us through this next session. Please welcome Chris and Cheryl.
Kia ora tātou. Ko te metu tahi, tēnā koe te atua. Nā nei nā mea katoa. Nā tangata katoa e huhi mai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā rā tātou katoa. Ko te Huramaka tako maunga. So my mountain is the Port Hills, probably like many of yours. In fact, I live in the bottom of that picture there at the top. Ko Waimakariri Takuawa. I identify with the Waimak because like you know, when you leave in New Zealand, you look out the window just after you take off and you see the Waimak, and likewise when you come back into town, you see the Waimak just before you land. And it's kind of, every time I see the Waimak there, I think, yep, I'm home. So my name's Chris Jansen. I'm from Canterbury here. Originally I trained as a civil engineer, which not many people know, and it's kind of a funny feeling being in Christchurch in a big rebuild now as an ex-civil engineer. I actually specialise in geotechnical engineering, so unfortunately I'm not licensed, otherwise I'd be tempted. Maybe not. But I've been a secondary teacher. I could say I've had an eclectic portfolio career. I was a secondary PE teacher in Mangere in South Auckland. I was a counsellor at Aranui High School, DP with Margaret, who's speaking later this morning, at Linwood a couple of years ago. But these days, I'm with Missy and Susan and others here at Canterbury University. I'm a senior lecturer in org leadership, and then also as a consultant outside, as Lyle has mentioned. It's an interesting experience for us, isn't it, living in Christchurch? And I know you're not all from Christchurch, but speaking as a Cantabrian who's lived elsewhere and are now back here, I'm finding it fascinating, traumatising, stimulating. There's definitely two sides to the coin. And not taking away the pain and loss that many of us have felt, I'm loving the opportunity. I'm loving the openness to new ways of doing things, and it's something I haven't experienced growing up in Canterbury, to be honest. Probably prior to the earthquake, we were not well known for open-mindedness and innovation. All right, we were into tradition, and this is the way we do things, and it's quite great around here. Would you like to come and join us? But it's a different kind of feel, isn't it, at the moment in Canterbury? And Cheryl and I are good friends. Obviously, we're not actually related, but we work together here and overseas quite a bit. And this morning, we'd just like to share a couple of thinking tools that we have found very useful, not only in education, but in other sectors. So the plan would be, I'm just going to share one slide, which is a thinking model, and then I'm going to show you how we've applied that to not only education, but health and engineering, and different professionals like us who just happen to have trained in a different profession, but deal with most of the same kind of stuff. And finally, I'm going to finish with a little bit of a caution as to things I've seen go seriously wrong. And then I'm going to hand over to Cheryl. You're going to have to kick me off, Cheryl, aren't you? Because you know I'll carry on a bit too long. So this is the mental model, or the thinking picture that we use, and we call it the change roadmap. All right, and what I'm going to do is just talk you through it, how the logic of it works. And in fact, yesterday I was down in South Canterbury working with a secondary school down there, and we were working with the board and proprietors, going through this exact mental model with them in terms of their strategic planning. So humour me, we'll talk through it and we'll see how it goes. So the idea of it is that you've got this thing called BAU, which stands for business as usual. Now, BAU is different for every sector, all right? But for education, we have a certain way of doing things. That's our business as usual. And we match that to our context. And our context is obviously our students and our communities. And we hope that our business as usual is well matched to our context. And if it is, everything's great. You could say the same thing about health. You know, doctors, nurses, allied health, they have a business as usual and they have a context, which is the communities and clients and patients that they serve, and you hope that those two things are matched up. Now, in my pocket here, a phone. All right, it's the same with these folks, okay? So Apple makes this one. All right, some of you might have one of this one, some of you might have other brands, but they have a business as usual and a context. Now, their context is a market that they're selling to, and their business as usual is the products they sell. Now, the problem with that is that the context doesn't behave itself. It actually moves. All right, and so the context can shift. So in the case of the smartphone, we all know what's happening there, don't we? All right, it's not a great time at the moment for Apple because probably a few years ago it was trendy to have an iPhone. If you go to China, Taiwan, Singapore, all right, some of you would have done that, you will see very, very few iPhones. Strangely enough, they make them in China, they don't use them in China. All right, what do you think you see? Samsung. Samsung is all over China and Taiwan and not an iPhone to be seen. All right, the reason is partly price, partly because they like the technology. All right, now, if you were the managing directors of Apple right now, you'd be seeing a gap between the context and your business as usual. In fact, it's probably about that big. All right, and the point is there's a gap between the context, in this case the market, people who want to buy things, and what you're providing. Now, we're not in business in that sense, we're in education. Okay? The question really is for anyone in leadership, are we matched to our context? All right? And are we aware, if there is a gap, are we even aware of it? Probably the worst thing to be in is thinking you're in this position, right, when you're actually in this position and not knowing it. All right? Now, Canterbury is in an interesting place because our context is like literally shifted, the ground's shifted. Business as usual is still there, but actually quite a bit of it's gone. And education, literally some of it's gone. Massive number of schools been, fixed or rebuilt. I mean, huge numbers, as we all know. Health, same thing. Rebuilding hospitals at the moment, closing down PMH, putting more out at Burwood. Christchurch City Hospital, massive changes there at the moment because of the gap. Right? Their gap is around ageing population and ageing staff. And those two coming together as a perfect storm in a few years where they know that if they carry on with business as usual, we will not be able to afford health. Right? So they need to change the way they do things. Now, if you're aware of a gap, then we start to think about what could be a new BAU to be more aligned with the context. Now, sadly, and the research shows this, that most transitions from an old business as usual to a new one don't make it. And it's hard to believe this, but they say 70 to 80% of those transitions or change processes don't actually make it. And when we say make it, they might make it for a year, but they're not sustained. All right, so I think of my own leadership experience. I can look back, X number of years and think about things that we're really, really focused on then. Did they actually come about? Yes, they did for a while, but they weren't sustained. Right? Another initiative came on top of it, and another one, all right, and it kind of fell away. But obviously we're looking for that pathway, and it's not a linear pathway, and you know that. It's a journey, really, from a way of doing things to transitioning to a new way of doing things. So most of my work, and probably all of my work these days, is with that red path, either for myself as a leader or the leaders I work with and coach and train and work alongside. We're all looking for that positive and sustainable change, all right, whether it be health, education, engineering, whatever. So there's 5 questions that go with this, and this is what I'm going to relate to these different sectors because we're currently using this with different, very diverse groups. So the first one is the why question, and really, because of that stat there, the 70-80%, we have to be really convinced that we want to do this. All right, it's not, although I actually personally like change, some people hate change. If I do it because I like change, that's a very bad reason because the odds are so high of not getting this right that it would be irresponsible. And often the why is either a threat or an opportunity. The threat would be Could be all sorts of things. And iPhones, you know, the reality is market share, all right? But for education, it's not meeting the needs of our students and communities, all right? But equally, the opportunity is to, like in the case of the market, it's about to lift market share, but I'd say in health or in education, it's to be able to actually provide a service that's way better than it was in the past. Now, with that is the second question, and that's related. It's not a 5-year strategic plan, it's a strategic intent towards roughly where we want to be going. So I can tell you in a moment, I'll show you where Canterbury Health is going. They don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but they've got a rough idea. And that's about all we can do. In the current 21st century context we're in, it's impossible to predict exactly where your organisation or company will be in 5 years because you don't know what's going to happen in the context. But we can have a sort of a broad idea. And I'll show you an example in a minute. The last 3 questions settle on the bottom, and they do come second. All right, so the why and the where is obviously first, but these 3 on the bottom, how is not the steps, that's the what. The how is kind of what are the things we should keep in mind, given that we know that this often doesn't work out. What are the principles that should be kept in mind? And that's what I want to come back to as the last piece here. The who, how are we actually going to do this? How are we actually going to take people with us? How are we going to convince our staff this is a good idea? How are we going to get our parent community on board with this? You know, what if our students revolt? All right, what if my DP doesn't want to do it? All right, what if, I'm actually dealing with a school at the moment overseas. Skype call last week with the principal really shocked me. Their whole head of department level had a vote of no confidence in the school and literally handed in resignation, every single one of them, of their HOD's positions in the meeting. So they wanted to stay as teachers, but we don't want to work for you anymore as your middle leaders, bye-bye. And they went back to being as teachers. So there was sort of like a mutiny within the school. Now, what's going on there? Nothing wrong with the why and the where, big problem with the who. All right, and why was there a problem with the who? It's because of the how. All right, they'd made some major errors in terms of engagement. Yeah. So that's the model, and Cheryl and I use this a lot, and we call it the roadmap for leading change. All right, and just quickly before we finish, we've got 5 minutes. Here's some examples. All right, so all of us get annoyed with these guys. All right, you probably did this morning. Have you noticed you have to add 10 minutes to your estimation of how long it's going to take you to get anywhere? All right, and the number of cones in town. But have you actually ever read what's on the sign? So it's interesting the comments in the open mic session before, because the thing about collaboration, which was kind of a theme there, is probably, I think, the number one theme in Christchurch at the moment. Can we get over ourselves and get over our differences to the point of being able to agree on a shared vision and pull our weight together? And I'm not talking education, but it is true for education. I'm talking for everything. We're dealing with Sarah and City Council. Now, they've got to deal with that, all right, and other government departments. We're talking about these guys. Now, if we think collaboration is a bit tricky between the sectors in education, try this, all right? This is SCIRT, and you know it, all right? It's a funny acronym, don't know why they chose it, all right? But 5 sworn enemies, all right? Those 5 construction companies are international, 4 of them international, but they're sworn enemies. They like to cut each other's throats. That's what they do. They tender and try and beat the other one to death in terms of financial tendering for construction projects. But they did actually try that approach after the September quake, but they realised very quickly after the February quake that that would be counterproductive both for them, but more importantly for the city. And it's another story. I'm not sure if Cheryl's going to mention it, but actually over a couple of coffees, they decided to try a different BAU. And the different BAU was an alliance, and the alliance meant let's pool our resources, let's create a mechanism not only to collaborate because we'd like to rebuild the city, which is their collective vision, but let's actually make the financial measures work so that it's actually beneficial to collaborate. So what Missy was saying, I completely agree with. It's not actually okay to say to schools you need to collaborate but still have a financial model where you compete, all right? Because that's actually setting up a tension which is a system problem. All right? There needs to be a shift in that. I don't know if we'll ever get that, but that's what these guys have done. They've had the KPIs, the key performance indicators, to promote collaboration plus a shared vision. All right. Here's another one. Here's Canterbury Health. You might have seen this around, but this is called their 2020 vision, and they're getting a lot of international publicity for this. But in a nutshell, look what's in the middle of the picture. You normally expect to see a hospital there, all right, but the hospital is actually around the top, all right, and in the middle is the home, all right, and their vision is people-centred health, and it's not just trite, they actually mean it in terms of we need to have more health happening in the community and in people's homes. Financially, it makes more sense, but also, wellness-wise, it makes a hell of a lot more sense. Now, that's a big shift for health, and they've got 16,000 staff in Christchurch, or in Canterbury, so they are going through quite a transition. But we're working with them, and one of the things they are using is that roadmap to think about why we're doing this, where do we roughly want to go, that's that, all right, and what are some of the steps we'll take. All right, and there's innovation happening all around their system. All right, still got a long way to go, and I don't know if they'll make 2020, but they're on a good track. This one really shocked us at UC because we didn't plan this, and Billy's, good to see you in the back there, Billy. Billy was a big part of this story, but not this particular bit. The students kind of shocked us because prior to this they were known for the Undy 500 and a few other things, and not quite as bad as Otago, but pretty close. But when they all actually got motivated in thousands and actually went and helped with the Student Volunteer Army, we didn't see that coming, to be honest. But what UC did, and it's just an interesting example of this, is, and Billy was a big part of this, is to say, how can we, as an institution, partner with our students so that they've gone and done this stuff, how can we actually support that? And what Billy and Rod and others set up was this free course called Christchurch 101, which I think, Billy, you said you expected to run it twice or something? Yeah, and once, okay. And the idea was all these students that had helped, that could be their practicum, and then let's do some classes where they reflect on why they got off their couch, and then that would be, we'll call that a community engagement course. Really good idea. It was free, lots of students signed up. Billy and I are running it at the moment. It's number 7, is it? Yeah, so we've got 40-something students in this class at the moment. It's just continued, all right? This is domestic students, international students engaged in Christchurch. So these photos at the bottom are just like in the last few weeks. Right, students out there doing stuff. Now, same idea, why, where, right? As a tertiary institution, as a institution sitting in a city that's getting rebuilt, what are the things you want to be involved in? Who would that be with? And you can see some of the partners there. And this is another interesting one that some of you are involved in. So Missy and Susan and Nikki and Julie and others that are coming this afternoon designed a course for this year for educators like yourselves in Canterbury who are trying to work out how to do this new thing, how to do the education renewal, how to merge and close and how to do MLE and MLP and all that kind of thing. And we didn't know if it would be interesting to people, but there's 60-something enrolled and lots of principals bringing their teams along. Some really, really interesting stuff. Some scary stuff like there's nothing really in the research to help them, so they're having to pioneer stuff from scratch.
Chris, can I just say, one of the reasons we launched this course is because principals came to us and said we need some help.
Absolutely.
We want a space to help us think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've put some samples of some of the schools there, but the actual school that kicked it off was out on the east side, wasn't it? Mike, I don't know. Yeah. So really this is just examples of this roadmap in action, all right? And underlying it all is this kind of radical collaboration to say, look, for the sake of something way bigger than any of us, let's just get over it and do something positive here. This is the rider, and I'll finish, Cheryl. I love this picture. All right. All right, so the guys on the safari are looking to the right, and they think it's all fine, but they don't realise the lions are right behind them. It is a male lion, so they are pretty safe because the females hunt. But I put this together with this quote, which is something that I have heard from Peter Drucker, a leadership dude from the States. But basically, this is the rider that, sure, we might have a change roadmap, sure, we might have a really good why and a where we're going and an intention, but at the end of the day, if we don't implement this right, we were going to get trumped every single time by culture, and we're not talking ethnicity, we're talking about the people who we lead. And so when you look back at the roadmap, where does that appear? It's right there at the bottom. All right? And I'm dealing with lots and lots and lots of these situations at the moment, which are fine at that level, but are losing it at that level. All right? And the cultural dimension of being able to lead an initiative, all right, and take people with you is an art form, as you know. And that's what we're really focusing on. I think I'll hand over to you, Cheryl. Yeah, I'll leave this. We'll leave this. We'll leave this.
Great, thanks folks. Hopefully you can hear. Ko ora te maunga, ko waimakariri te awa, ko Huntress te waka, ko Aotearoa te iwi, ko Drummond te hapu, ko Doig te whānau, ko Cheryl Doig tōku ingoa no o te tahi ahau. Definitely o te tahi, but do a lot of travelling and have a lot of things that I'm interested in that are to do with changing the way we lead. So I work in the leadership for the future and what that actually means. Just to get started, I'm going to go back to this slide because there's a bit.ly link, which is also on the whiteboard for later. If you want these slides, you click on the link and that's where they are. All right, so it's there. It's just the link to HTTP, then bit.ly with a dot between the T and the L, and then ELF 2014. So I'll leave that up there. I just want to follow on from Chris's thoughts and produce this in a sort of slightly different framework that looks at those two top things that Chris was talking about. Let's just look at them. The importance of knowing where you are now and the place that you inhabit, and not where you think you are, but actually going out and inquiring from the people and having a really good environmental scan. All right, talk to other people in your organisation, talk to your stakeholders or the people that matter, and have a really good grasp on today. But also on the vision. Where do we want to head? This is the why that Chris was talking about. This is the golden circle of people like Simon Sinek. Both really, really important. And the framework in the middle, I guess, is like Chris's three things at the bottom. So I just want to explore some of these ideas in a pretty quick format and take you through these different ways of thinking and what that might look like if we're leading change and trying to move our organisations forward. Because, you see, I work as a futurist. I'm impatient with the pace of change. And so I want to be a bit provocative and say that we've got lag. If we stand there and we block and say, no, we can't do that, then in 10 years' time, we're going to find that our business, whether it's school or other organisations, are going to be irrelevant. And I worry about that because I think some people have blinkers on about the pace of change and things like technology and how that implicates where we're heading. So that for me is the sense of urgency. But also, if we just continue as we are, we will have the status quo. And while that we think that might meet the needs of people today, actually does it, and for how long? Because it won't be long before the curve starts to move down, and before we realise it, we've actually missed the next upswing of change. So that's sort of where I'm coming from the lag point of view. What I see, and I'm just using some examples from Christchurch here, we've got lots of broken schools and modern learning environments, etc., being built. Some people saying, oh, let's just have a bit of a play. Nothing wrong with that. And so they're doing what I call what we had before, but with better windows. All right, so we'll just knock out a few walls and we'll have a play. We're working on the current system, trying to make it as good as we can. This session, I don't want to focus on those. I actually want to focus on the two upswings, the push and the pull, and the effect that that has on us as organisations and moving forward, because this is the impatient part for me. We have some push in our city. We have been told that new schools really are going to be modern learning environments, which means more open, more collaborative ways of teaching. We can't say, no, sorry, we want to have the same boxes that we've always had. It's probably not going to happen from a ministry point of view for the build. But also, we've been told in Christchurch education, you will collaborate. And that's gone passingly well in some cases. But those are push approaches, right? So more of a done to. And the pull approach, again, is about agency and ownership. So I want to be part of this journey because it's so bloomin' exciting. I'm in. Count me in. So I'm not talking about buy-in, that's a transaction, I'm talking about commitment. So just want to take us through some of those examples, focusing on push-pull and one other secret ingredient. So let's just first of all look at the push point of view. So here I'm talking about in terms of being an intentional leader, deliberately pushing where you are heading. And Steve talked about that a little bit yesterday. This is the brave part of leadership, that sometimes you just have to tell people how it's happening. We've had some telling in Christchurch and we haven't always liked it, and it hasn't always been successful. But the Ministry of Education have told us some things, the government direction has told us some things. Now from a cluster point of view, schools have been told to collaborate. The interviews that I've done looking at clusters of collaborators, so not just schools, but as Chris said, places like Skirt, health, industry, social services, etc. One of the things I find fascinating is that some had that push and they rose to the challenge. And others said, this is terrible, it's not going to work, I'm not going to work with such and such down the road, he steals my kids. Quite different approaches, actually with the same push. Why is that? And for me, it comes down to a number of things from the studies that I've done so far. A lot of it has been who's in the room and the mix of people, but it takes one or two leaders in the group to say, so how can we make this work? How can we make something from a collaboration that's better than we could achieve if we did it separately? Because otherwise, why bother? So there are two things that would push me to change, and they're to do with motivation. If I'm not motivated, I can't see some reason, then forget it. My cluster's not going to work. It's only when I've got that motivation that then we have to work how we will do this together. And that's another set of skills. So motivation and capability are two of the key factors whether collaboration will work or not. So Bayes cluster here yesterday talking about their journey. They were already a cluster. So for them it was an opportunity to say, let's tinker and let's do some new things. We've got a little bit of funding, so that's good. We've got some more money. Others have been completely new, and when they have gained momentum, it's because of the push. And what one principal said to me was, I can't believe why we never did this. I'm just down the road from such and such. We've never talked to each other. So the push can be a positive thing in our organisations. So, again, this is about the push. We're all doing this professional development. It's not an option. So this is the stuff that moves on creating mechanisms that support compelling change. And you'll see that reducing choice is not necessarily a bad thing as leaders. It's not all come with me, because some people won't. So which bits are the push and how far do you want to take that? Because coming back to Chris's overseas example, if it's all push, then nobody's going to have the confidence to walk with you. Second example is the pull. Now, we'd all want people to come on the journey in our organisation because it's magic and everyone's committed. Anyone got an organisation like that? Totally, there you go, he's the man. Yeah, so a couple of people. So what can we learn from those people? And I know Chris's workshop this afternoon, he does amazing stuff on appreciative inquiry, but the stories of success are really, really important. This is about mobilising people, and you'll see it's about creating an ecosystem that encourages people to join. Someone said to me the other day, we've got this is in the health sector, we've got this particular issue, and we've got a membership part. Whatever we do, we don't seem to be able to make it work. What's your what are your findings as you scan the environment internationally? My answer was, actually, membership organisations are a thing of the past. They're a dying breed. It's a different way of working that we want to pull people to us. So volunteer army, it just actually emerged. Enabling a volunteer army, and I'm not talking about the student volunteer army here, but coming to an example of from business as usual, I'll use the example from St Andrews College. Big organisation, successful school, runs a business. It's got to have its mainstay of what it does, but at the same time, it's got a group of people who are the innovation group, who want to do some exciting things and do some prototyping and work together and try all sorts of different things. That's running side by side with the main organisation, and the rector has enabled that to happen just by being, open to the suggestions. So those groups, not saying, yeah, you can come and join in this group, sorry, you're out. It's saying, who wants to be in this? Like, oh man, that's amazing. And for me, in the work that I've been following with these people, what it's done is create a sense of emergence to some really funky new things. So a couple of weeks ago, I presented at EdChat NZ, which is a hashtag online get-together from some people, including some of the STAC team. They decided they would have a physical conference for change. So the hashtag for EdChat NZ was started by a group of teachers, mainly in Auckland, third-year teacher Danielle, getting together and saying, let's start doing some exciting things together and creating a pool of excitement. And then, let's actually have a physical conference, because it's really nice to meet online, but actually want to see what you look like up close. And so 250, they had to close it off. They did some magic things. It was a pull, right? I want to be part of this. In Christchurch, Paul Simpson, who replaced me as principal at Fendleton School 7 years ago, he put out a challenge to the principals in the city and said, 2 weeks, the challenge is join Twitter. Well, lots did. So, actually, I'm getting some really good research and information from this. He didn't say, actually, you've got to do it, this is a directive. But people joined, and now, yesterday, the day before, was the first leaders' chat that had emerged from that, with people sharing some of their good ideas. So the pull can be a really, really important part of our work. Agency and choice, big upswing. So one of my questions is, in your organisations, what's the mixture of pull and push? Because they weave together, not to be separated. Couple of examples. Craig Kemp, New Zealand educator living in Singapore. This is his latest blog post where he got some of his students to evaluate his performance. He didn't wait till the end of the year. This is an ongoing work in progress. And what he said was, one of my students came and she felt she wasn't being stretched, and so she went away and designed some sort of an evaluation for him in terms of his practice. She came back, the whole class evaluated his performance. For those of you that are wondering, I discussed potential goals with her, and she suggested that I might like to work on continuing to tell engaging stories that are related to our topic of learning. Another goal was continue supporting students in their learning, but give them another space to learn from their mistakes. Right? Those are pull technologies that are encouraging people to join because they're being listened to. And I wonder in our organisations how much those young emerging people, whether they are our young teachers or our younger teachers, our learners, how we are enabling them to take part in our organisations and start to create that wave of change. Would they actually want to work with you? So just take 30 seconds, quick conversation, push, pull. Would these people want to work with you? Please take 30. Thanks, folks. I did say I would only be 30, but I think it's worth thinking about from the developing of your culture, that balance of push-pull changes over time and with different people in your group. But also, my wondering really is about the young people, and I want to show you an example of young people in action. Chris mentioned Skirt, and it's a really good example of push-pull working together. When you go to Skirt, you walk in there, and behind the receptionist, there's a big sign, and people have signed to what they call the noble purpose. This is the extended version of what Chris was saying. So wherever you go in that building, you will find artefacts on the walls that are the story that you are encouraged to engage with. Everywhere. It's not left to chance. So we've got the signatories. They have a staff meeting of their 300 people, 10 to 10:30 every Friday morning, and it's a time when they talk about the new communications, new people introduce themselves, and it's part of the collective process of us weaving the organisation and not leaving it to chance. The Chief Executive talks about his intentional way of leading for this to happen. So it's an interesting mix, as Chris said. It fascinates me because it is a tension between cooperation and competition. And from a cluster point of view of schools, I wonder how we could do both so that when things are going well, we all get to share in the profits, and when things aren't going so well, we all get the losses together and work for new ways to uplift the whole group, because that's what they do. It's quite a complex model, but everyone benefits when everyone succeeds. The whole building design, one place that you can get water, it's in the lunchroom, and that's where you go. You go and meet the chief executive, and he says, do you want to have a cup of tea? Yep, great, we've got to go and help yourselves around here, and off you go to the kitchen, deliberately designed for that sort of purpose. And again, with their induction programs, half day with the leaders of the company to be inducted into the way we do things around here and to intentionally talk about those sorts of things. So it's a really good example, I think. Last thing I just want to mention is as well as push and pull, I think we need to start creating new spaces, and this is in the area of emergence, where sometimes we actually can't plan for the future. And being comfortable in that unknown space, that adaptive leadership way of working, I don't think we spend enough time intentionally being there and letting ourselves feel uncomfortable with the fact that there are multiple answers. We don't know where we're heading, and only sometimes in retrospect can we see that. So I think this is the step change that we need to work on in our leadership and help other people to feel uncomfortable in. Kate was saying yesterday, remember the teacher at Fendleton, her name was Ruth, I remembered, who was new to the school, and she was the only teacher that on the first day had nothing out. All the other teachers, well organised, etc. She didn't, because she wanted the students to do it. Let's do it together, emergence. Create a huge ruckus with the parents because they saw that as being disorganised, and it was a really difficult time for the teacher. And yet, what Kate says is that was the best year for her son ever in his education. Yeah, so what are we doing to allow that complexity to sit and to generate, I guess? I want to just finish with a quick video. One of my roles is on the establishment board of the Aranui Community Campus. Year 1 to 13 campus in Christchurch. In 2017, 4 schools will close and this new campus will emerge. Huge, wonderful opportunity. And one of the things that we did was get a group of 18 executives, business people from around the city, 6 students, including Kiwa, who was here yesterday, and say, how might we do a whole lot of things? So using design thinking principles, how might we blur the boundaries between home and school? How might we create a school that no one wanted to leave? Those sorts of things. So it was a 2-hour process. I just want to show you one of those videos so you can see what I think is the power in us, the secret weapon, and that is our young people and using their possibilities. So. to work.
Our question was, how might we turn our school into a laboratory? And so pretty much the main idea that we came up with is having a school of experiment where nothing is taken just for what it is. And pretty much this entails just giving students the freedom just to explore the subjects that they're passionate about. And it all starts with flexibility in the curriculum, allowing the student to choose what they want to research into. And it's also, this could lead to an amazing opportunity to develop young leaders, like say setting up a lecture theatre and allowing students to run lectures teaching the wider Christchurch community about the research topics that they've delved into. And hey, wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah. So basically, Alex came up with this great concept at the top of the laboratory, challenging everyone, the students, and then we all came up with the idea of inviting the community in, so through the open lectures and so on.
I won't play the whole thing, but you can see that there was a group of people, business people, students working together, because I think actually we're all one. And part of this work is the realisation that we're educating for purpose. So it was a really powerful tool, and I guess from that, what we've learnt is that intentional acts of leadership are really what matter. So I'll leave that. There are no excuses from our point of view, and I guess coming back to Steve's work yesterday, I'm not interested in accidental futures, neither is Chris. It's preferred futures. Don't always get there because it's a Chris's wavy line, but actually we have to start designing things that are much more future oriented. So I'm just going to hand back to Lyle and.
Yep.